share with us the program. I believe the monastery has got a program happening in Vesak. What's going to be the program like in Vesak?
Yep. So next week, the Vesak full moon day is on Sunday, the 15th of May. But we will have an all-night meditation vigil at the monastery on Saturday night, the 14th of May, just because it's perhaps a more convenient night to do it. So that's the night before Vesak, going into Vesak Day. And we'll have a program beginning here at 7 p.m, which will be on the Facebook live stream if you're interested to participate from wherever you are. And there'll be a meditation and chanting and a talk, probably from Lumpur Karuniko, who's staying here at the moment. And the circumambulation, offering flowers, candles, incense to the Buddha shrine, which you can still participate in at home. If you get your flowers and candles and incense ready, you can join in at the same time. And then here we'll be having a night of meditation, sitting, walking. So if you're in Melbourne, you want to come up, you are welcome to join in. Bring a good warm jacket because it sometimes gets chilly, but you're welcome to join us. And at midnight, there'll be Parita chanting, and then practicing again through till 4 a.m, morning chanting, finished by 5 a.m. If you're at the monastery, we'll give you some breakfast at dawn. So that's at the monastery, but we'll also be streaming at least part of that program as a live stream using some of this new equipment, which some of you have helped to fund. We've got a big new screen, which people are saying is the biggest screen they've ever seen. I don't think it is. I think there's plenty of other big screens in the world, but it's the biggest screen we've ever had here. So we appreciate the donations and support we got for buying some of the live stream equipment last week, which is very good of you for your own benefit. But we appreciate the dana you made, and we appreciate your efforts in joining in the live streams, listening to the Dhamma, chanting, meditating, and I hope you can continue.
So it means that next Sunday, the Dhamma Zoom session will take a break because everything is being live streamed onto Facebook. Yeah, so this Dhamma Zoom session will take a break for next Sunday. Okay. So brothers and sisters, if you have a question and or you have a comment for Lumpur, please feel free to click on the raise hand button. Yeah, and we'll invite you to unmute. Now that Lumpur can see you, I think he will welcome, seeing you on screen much clearer now. As before, he was actually looking at everyone from a small iPad. Okay. Anyone got comments or just want to get some feedback for Lumpur? Questions? Okay, Leong Tan. Yes, Leong Tan, can I invite you to please turn on your video? Yes, please. Thank you. Can you unmute yourself?
Good evening, Lumpur. Greetings from Singapore. Thank you for all the guidance through the Facebook Q&A, the Saturday talks, the retreats. It has been very helpful for us, especially during this COVID time. For the past 2 years, we have not stepped into any monastery during this time, but we have been attending your talk almost every week over Zoom. This evening, I have a question regarding the restlessness. It is described in the factors in the Samyojana as well as in the 5 hindrances, the Nivaranas. So what is the difference between these two, as in the restlessness in the as described in 10 fetters, and that described as in the 5 hindrances. Thank you.
Well, you probably say it's a matter of degree. So when we're looking at just the ordinary unenlightened person practicing mindfulness and meditation, one of the hindrances is the one we call uddhacca kukucca, restlessness, agitation, and that can be worries about things we've said and done in the past, worries and anxiety about things that may happen in the future. Obviously that leads to endless thinking and agitation of mind, so we can't concentrate on an object, we can't bring the mind to stillness as long as we're under the influence of that kind of hindrance, the restlessness of the mind. And most people find it's very difficult to deal with as well. You need a lot of patient effort and a lot of work to keep bringing the mind back to the breath, and until that kind of restless energy, whatever it is that is bothering us, whether it's thoughts about the past, the future, it can even be thoughts about good things we haven't done or feel we should do, or it could be about bad things that we've done and regret. But it's a really strong energy that often takes a long time to let go of, which is one reason why it's good to practice for longer periods, sitting and walking, because then you really can bring that restlessness to an end sometimes. But that's for the ordinary person developing meditation, developing states of samadhi, stillness, and also for training in insight and wisdom as well. It will be coming up all the time, and it can be very coarse. And you can sit there and be restless for 20 minutes or 30 minutes thinking about something over and over again, and you're sort of, when am I going to get peaceful? When am I going to let go of this? Until maybe after a long time it finally seems to subside. And that's a very common experience for most of us. But talking about restlessness in the Sangyojana, the fetters, you're probably aware there's the 10 fetters, the first 3 that the Sotapanna abandons, and then the next 2 the Sakatagami weakens but doesn't fully abandon. Then the Anagami, the non-returner, abandons all 5 of the first fetters. So that's personality view or self-view, skeptical doubt, uncertainty about the practice, attachment to, or wrong attachment, blind attachment to rites and rituals and practices, and then sensual desire, lust, and ill will. The Anagami has abandoned those, but then the 5 more refined, higher fetters are still there. So they're very subtle qualities of mind, like the attachment to the bliss of jhana, the rupa jhanas, arupa jhanas, the conceit, the very subtle sense of self, of someone who's still not enlightened, although they're very advanced in their practice. They attain samadhi and they have abandoned their attachment to the body, greed, anger, lust, but they still have a very subtle sense of self, and they have ignorance, and they have a restlessness of mind. But the restlessness of mind of the Anagami, that they're abandoning to become an arahant, fully enlightened, is a very subtle restlessness of mind. It's not the same kind of restlessness as we are experiencing, trying to work with this mind that won't settle down. It's just thinking and thinking about the past, the future. It's a much more subtle restlessness that may be simply the awareness that I haven't yet attained Nibbana, experienced the unconditioned permanently. There is still a little bit of movement of mind here. There's still some identification with a sense of self, whether it's in the experiences of jhana, or the subtle sense of self comparing to another person, they're higher than me, lower than me. These are the most subtlest kind of defilements that anyone on the outside wouldn't even know are there. Only the Anagami is really going to know for themselves, or perhaps a Buddha or an Arahant might know, because they're fully free. So it's a very subtle restlessness. It's not the same as the kind of restlessness we're dealing with in our daily meditation. But the roots are the same. You might call it the movement of the mind caused by any kind of defilement, however coarse or subtle. It's the movements of the mind, the regrets, the agitated nature of defilement. Your mind is not still. And we're not talking just about samadhi when we're talking about a theta. We're talking about at any time the mind is not completely still yet. So the only way to really know the theta of restlessness and abandon it is first you have to become an anagami.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you, Long Po. Thank you.
Do we have the next question? Perhaps let me ask a question, Lampo. Lampo, given that it's also Mother's Day today, right? And you talked about how as children we learn to appreciate our mother, we dedicate merits through a practice to our parents. But how would you also perhaps maybe give a bit of advice to parents on how they should be kind to their children? As parents, we are very vexed and frustrated with our children, but like the Buddha says, we each have our own karma. So what would be your words of wisdom, please, as parents?
Yeah, I think this is something that comes up every day for so many people. If you have children, then you have to take responsibility for that decision to have children. And it's a lifetime commitment and it's a lifetime responsibility, isn't it? So you have to really come back to patience and acceptance and forgiveness of your kids. And it really goes hand in hand with Dhamma practice, because why do we get angry with our kids? Well, because we lose our mindfulness, we lose our patience, we stop forgiving them at that moment and maybe blame them or expect them to be different than they are or wish that they will be different from they are. So our Dhamma practice can really help us with this, dealing with kids and accepting them as human beings that are different from us. Because one of the defilements of parents is this sense of ownership. These kids are my kids. I produced them. I brought them up. I look after them, care for them, pay for them, do everything for them. And there's a lot of good karma in there. But on the subtle level, there's the attachment and the sense of ownership, which is always going to bring suffering, isn't it? So when your kids don't act in the way you would like them to, they're annoying, they're tiring, they're naughty, they're lazy, they're this, they're that, you'll get your reaction of aversion based on not getting what you want. What you want is your kids to be perfect, exactly as your mind would like them to be, as you would imagine a perfect kid to be. That's your problem, isn't it? Because then they can't match that ideal. So you got to lower your expectations a bit and accept them for as they are. Just as your parents accepted you, you have to accept your kids. They're not perfect. They will think differently than you. They will do things differently from you. They're brought up with a different set of conditions. So, we always hear this parent, in my day, we can make jokes about it. In my day, we had to walk to school and we had no money and we had to work for so many hours and we had to sacrifice and do this and we could never be naughty and we could never answer back. And we hear all that. And then our kids are brought up in a time where they're comforted and spoiled and have a lot more material wealth and a lot more freedoms, maybe social freedoms. So we have to adjust for that, don't we? We can't just expect them to behave like we did because times are different. On top of that, each child has its own personality. They have their good points and their bad points, just as we have our strengths and weaknesses, so do they. So you have to factor all that into your thinking and the way you relate to them, and just try and bring up the mindfulness. And your mindfulness isn't just about sitting watching your breath in a meditation class. It's also about remembering that you're a parent when you're with your kids, and a parent has to set an example, has to love, care for the kid, has to see what is in the best interest for the kid. You have to remember all kinds of things, and that's part of mindfulness practice, isn't it? Remembering what you need to remember in that situation, remembering your precepts. So one of the problems is, parents get angry and then they say things which they regret and maybe are hurtful, harmful, sometimes not true. Very occasionally, maybe, they lose their temper and hit the kid or whatever. It's understandable because life is frustrating. Having families, having kids is frustrating, but part of our mindfulness practice is being mindful of the precepts, mindful of who we are, what we're doing, practicing mindfulness of our speech, our actions. There's a whole range of things we are working on. So try and see your parent-child relationship as part of the practice. It's not separate from the practice. And your kids are teaching you to see your own mind, your own reactions, your own attachments, your own expectations, which are bringing you so much suffering. So learn to be more mindful, pause, consider what's going on as much as you can, use wisdom, intelligence and understanding. Don't rush to judge your kids, don't react to them quickly. Learn to respond to them, but not react to them with anger. And then you might find that, bringing up kids can actually make you a better person. Helps you in your practice. You become more mindful, wiser, kinder, more compassionate, and they can teach you many things. And your kids, will have all kinds of good qualities that you can learn from. And sometimes our kids will have insight into something that we don't. Be ready for that. Be open-minded enough to learn in a situation from your child. They may see something. They may be generous when you're being stingy, or they may be forgiving when you're being very angry and vengeful. They may be very mindful when you're very distracted. They're a human being too, and they may have good qualities that are coming up when you don't. Just as you may have good qualities coming up when they don't, they can be the same. They can have good qualities when you're losing yours. So be open-minded enough to learn from your kids, support them, tolerate them, and just keep working at it. And maybe having kids will get you enlightened quicker.
I think many parents here are rejoicing right now with three loud sadhus. So there is a question here, Longpo. It's in the chat box. Let me read it out to you. It's from Ray Fang. Longpo, when I walk to work, I recite metta verses to my parents, colleagues, beings in my country and in the world. I find that the strength of my mindfulness is very weak. I may confuse verses. It seems it is purely recitation and I don't find them uplifting. What should I do to strengthen my mindfulness?
I didn't get all of that, but as far as I know, you're reciting metta as you walk to work, and just keep doing it as mindfully as you can. Is that correct? Does that make sense? Because I didn't hear all the question, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but the question is also, second part of the question is that she may get confused with some of the verses of the Metta Sutta, and she may find that it's just purely recitation, and she doesn't find the words uplifting.
Lower your expectations again. You're hoping that reciting this sutta will immediately put you in a very positive wholesome state of mind, but maybe the problem is not the words of the sutta, maybe it's your attitude or lack of mindfulness at that time, because each day is different, and you may wake up and there may be something bothering you that's stopping you from really getting into the recitation of that sutta. Just as in meditation or any other part of the practice, there'll be different mental defilements coming up at different times from different causes. So number one is always try to establish mindfulness in the present moment, and then try and acknowledge and recognize what's going on. And maybe there's something you're not seeing. Maybe you got up on the wrong side of the bed. There's something that happened yesterday that's still bothering you, that's putting you in a particular mood, a bad mood or something. So when you recite the words don't have much meaning for you. You're not really concentrating on them, thinking about them, or you don't find them uplifting. It's not that the words are the problem, it's your attitude and your effort at that moment. And you have to recognize that. And maybe just change. Maybe you do something a bit different sometimes according to what the problem is. So if you're distracted, well, you might have a strategy of getting a particular object that you find really helps you to be mindful. So it could be the breath or Buddha, or it could be chanting as well. But if you're angry, maybe you have to go to a feeling, develop a loving feeling. Or just tell yourself to let it go, accept if something's happened that annoyed you, remind yourself to accept it and let go. If there's something bothering you, maybe you're anxious about something upcoming event, and reciting these words is not taking away this feeling of anxiety. You may have to be very patient with it, and remind yourself what's going on. Oh, I've got this thing coming up later is making me anxious. I've got to see a doctor, or I've got to have a meeting with a difficult person or something. Try and understand better what is going on, and then think what Dhamma can you use to deal with that situation. And part of practice is like that. You have to be adaptable to what's coming up in your karma, your mind on that day, on that occasion, and it will vary, won't it? So some days it's very easy to be in a wholesome state, peaceful, happy. Other days, whatever you do, you just feel awful. What are you going to do when you feel awful? Well, number one, be very patient, accepting of that mood. Try to give yourself good instructions to be patient, to be kind to yourself at that time because you're feeling awful. Be careful what you say and do, because your awful mood may make you take it out on somebody else. So be careful. If you're in a very awful mood, you're tired or you're angry, well, don't take on too much. Don't push yourself too hard on that day. If you're feeling very bright and energetic, well, maybe you can do a lot more on that day. Every day is different, and you have to adapt your practice according to how you're feeling, what's going on. And some days a recitation of the Metta Sutta will go really well, and other days it's like, oh, this is hopeless, this is useless. But it's not so much the Metta Sutta, is it? It's the mood and the feeling you're experiencing, and you may have to adjust your practice to deal with that.
Thank you, Longpo. So can I please invite Amita from the UK, please?
Hello, Longpo. Thank you very much for the talk today. I had a very scattered and hungry mind looking for information about Sri Lanka's situation. So, and then I had I was very tensed when I came this morning to you, and then I listened to the talk, and then I feel so much better, Longpo. Thank you very much. And I kind of recognized that when you said the clinging mind is the hungry mind, so it really hit me. And then I kind of recognize what's happening there. And also you said something about the equanimity. You gave a different definition to equanimity. I can't remember that. It was really helpful. That word I can't remember though. Thank you, Longpo. So I thought I really must thank you.
And I know the situation in Sri Lanka is very difficult at the moment, and many people are frustrated. Even if you're not living there, you've got relatives, family there.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's some part of the practice, is dealing with those feelings of frustration. Where are they coming from? Well, probably your attachment to the country, the people, this, you know, you identify strongly with that. So any bit of news will be like tugging on your heartstrings, and you'll feel up when there's good news and down when it's bad news. That's something to contemplate, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is coming from ignorance, conditioning, craving, and attachment. And letting go of that doesn't mean to say you don't care about Sri Lanka or the people there or the situation there. But what you're letting go of is the ignorance that's conditioning this reaction of attachment, feeling annoyed, frustrated, feeling sad, feeling depressed, whatever. That's what you're working with. And bringing up the mindfulness, you accept the attachment, you know where it's come from because you've been born in Sri Lanka and you've built up this identification with Sri Lanka over the years. Fair enough. But at the same time, it's still been conditioned by ignorance. So now you have to investigate that and try to bring the mind back to a place of mindfulness. Allow the feeling to arise, but allow it to pass away, the feeling of frustration or disappointment, depression, whatever. And then your mind is freer to start thinking what you can do that is useful. And it, you know, if you're in another country, maybe there's not a lot you can do, but at least you can maybe meditate, just send your thoughts of kindness and compassion across the ocean to Sri Lanka. That might be a positive thing. Reflect on the, you know, the uncertainties of life and how the economy now, the global economy, everyone is affected by different things happening in the world. So you just reflect on the uncertainties of life. Try and bring up mindfulness and wisdom to counter the blind reaction of attachment to, in this case, to country and the situation in your home country. Because your ignorance and your attachment is not going to help you, not going to help anyone else. It doesn't add to the situation in any good way. And if you leave it unaddressed, well, it can get stronger, and if you become angrier and angrier, and then you have arguments with people and get frustrated and want to hurt people, or, you know, I'm not saying you do, but that's his logical conclusion, isn't it? You get so frustrated, so angry that you might do destructive things.
Thank you, Longpo. It's really helpful. Thank you. I already feel better.
Good. So we wish everybody in Sri Lanka freedom from suffering. May they all have enough food and enough things to get by. May nobody be lacking in medical care or food or the basic necessities of life. This is the basics of human life, isn't it? And you know, there's no point talking about meditation and all those things if you still haven't got enough food to eat, or you can't pay for your medical care or get medical care. So these are the essentials of life. So it's very important. So we'll just have to do what we can in Sri Lanka and any other country where there's problems like this.
Thank you, Longpo. We'll take a final question from Yang. Yang of China.
Good evening, Longpo. Because today is Mother's Day, and you talk about how we can pay back our gratitude to Mother. So my question is, in Thailand, they have the culture, very good culture, that guys, before they get married, they can become a monk for a month, return the marriage to parents. But unfortunately, not in other cultures. So my question is, in other cultures, like I'm in China, and as a female, I cannot be ordained as a monk for just a month. So is there any possibility, for example, I mean, if I don't attach to the rituals, I can practice every day and share the merit. But does that help even better? Just to, for example, practice like a 8 precepts, woman for 1 month living in the temple and then return married to parents, And also if your parents are not supporting this practice, you're not blessed that have parents that are understanding and supporting this way of life. If you choose to do this way, may cause them to be angry or resentment. Does that cause a negative karma on them? So should I wait until they are no longer in the world, and then I can, fall on and then return married? Just thinking about to spare them of possible bad karma. That's a question. Thank you.
Yeah, this is a difficult question for many people. And in Thailand, just the same as anywhere else, many Buddhists don't want their children to practice Dhamma very much. They want them to go off and earn money and get married and have families. They don't want them to become monks and nuns and all that. And that's the same in Thailand as anywhere else. It's amazing that people do still become monks and nuns in this world, because so many parents don't want it, and they have to whoever does want to become a monk and nun has to really work at it. The important thing is to see that if you have faith in the Buddha and his teachings, your intention is not to harm anyone, certainly not your parents, but you have to be very patient with the different understanding that they have. And everyone's situation is different. It's hard to generalize, but you may be able to pursue a Dhamma practice even though your parents are not supportive. How much effort and time you put into it and how far you go, well, this depends on you personally, as your commitment, your faith. Some people can go a long way because they trust in the goodness of what they're doing, and they trust that in the long run it will bring benefit to their family as well as themselves, their parents and others, and they're willing to put up with any criticisms, bad feeling from the parents, because they know it's not them intending that their parents suffer. They understand it's coming from attachment and a different view on life. And so they don't argue with their parents, they don't fight them, and they just quietly get on with their practice and put up with the criticism. And aiming that in the long run, the good that they do will be seen and come back to the parents, and maybe the parents will actually, we say, give their anumodana, appreciate the good that their son or daughter has done in their practice. But it may take a long time before that comes through, and you have to be very patient. But how far you go in your practice, I would have thought certainly you could find time to keep the 8 precepts. You don't even have to tell anyone that you're doing that. You just quietly do it for yourself on some occasions, like on a free day, a weekend, or a non-work day. And some people even do it when they go to work, but it obviously is harder then. When you're at work, if you can't keep 8 precepts, you keep the 5 precepts. You can meditate when you get the chance. You get up, if nobody is supporting your meditation practice, you just have to quietly get up early in the morning when everyone else is resting, and you do it then. Or you stay up late at night doing it when everyone else has gone to sleep. You just have to work around the situation the best you can. And when it's holiday time, you go off and you do your retreat. You might just be able to do 7 days or 15 days. Better than nothing. You do it when you get the chance. And you try and introduce the Buddhist qualities into your life, but without calling them Buddhist qualities or talking about the Buddha. Maybe you keep that to yourself, and you practice generosity and compassion every day, and you practice mindfulness of your actions, your speech every day, and you meditate when you can, you listen to Dhamma when you can. And as far as opening up to other people around you, how you practice and how much you're doing and what you're doing, well, you just see what works. And some people you can tell and share what you're doing with them, and they may support you and understand you. Other people may not understand you, so you don't have to share much with them. You just quietly do it. And whatever opinion they have, well, that's their opinion, but you have no wish to harm them. So you just sort of learn how to skillfully practice in society when only some people will be supportive and others won't. And that's just part of life. And I think most practitioners have to face this. So you're not alone. We all have to. I've had people telling me I'm crazy because I meditate. This is, say when I was a layperson, they say, you're crazy, you're turning your back on your family, you're wasting your human life, you're doing all kinds of horrible things. People will say them, but they're just words. If you're not actually doing anything horrible, quite soon that becomes obvious to these people, I think, and they start to quiet down and, accept you. And maybe even one day they'll turn around and appreciate you and think you're doing a good thing.
Thank you, Luang Por. I think, it's not that they're opposing me, but maybe I expecting too much that they were supporting me, like giving me blessings. Oh, go to do that, go for it. But I guess that is the expectation. But I think it's a really good practice, how you can be mindfully practicing in the society, all the detailed suggestions you give. It's appreciated. Thank you, Luang Por.
Are there any more questions? So Luang Por, I think that would be all for this evening. All the questions have been answered today. We thank you for your gracious time and your wise teachings tonight. And with that, may we wish you well. And today, it being honoring of our parents, but you are like a parent to many of us, a spiritual parent to many of us. And we also honor you in our practice, and we sincerely offer you our best wishes for good health.